Okay guys, so far we are doing very well, and now we will face first of many examples when people start to give up from learning Python. And like you see, we build our code, but now it's time to optimize our code and to write it in proper way, which will be more clear and understandable for any developer who will check later our code. And to do that, we will use nested if-else statements, and that can be a little bit confusing and tricky, so please watch carefully every step I'm going to do, and I will try to explain it as clear as possible. What is nested function? We already have that example here, where we converted the result immediately stored to be integer for value entered in meter to centimeter function. And that's totally fine if we leave our code to remain like this. But we don't want to do that. We want to define new function which will make only validations. So all these checkings for positive number, for number equal to 0, and to everything else what is not integer, we will put and place in one new function. And it will be something like this. Let's say new function called validator. And inside that function, we will simply copy and paste this code. And this user input variable, which is actually global variable, we will put on top of our code, and that's the proper way how to make everything, to put global variables on top, that later in your code you can call them in any functions what you have. So what we are going to do now, we want to merge these checkings here, this one, and place them in the separated dedicated function to make only validation. So now when we defined our function, we also need, when we are done, to make call of this function when we run our code, right? This is the way how we will call that function. And like you see in our new function, we don't have any parameters. It's empty between parentheses, and we don't need to provide user input here, because I just say it's global variable, and we will call it from global variable which is defined already. So now when we defined our code in proper way, our next step is to make if-else to be nested, and in the way we will reduce our code, and we will put all validation and validation logic inside this one function called validator. So what we are going to do now, we will check that if number of meters is greater than 0 after user provide us some input. So we will put it here, and we will make here some checking. And after that, if everything is okay, we will simply print. And what you think, what we will print? We will print converted results. And if it's greater, and if it's equal to 0, let me put in the proper line, we will print this error line. We can simply place it here and make indentation. And we have here another, from this if-else statement, we have another checking which is not integer. So what will happen if I run this program now after I delete these lines? We don't need actually anymore. Let me put this in proper indentation, and let's run this code. We put some text and we get proper answer. But if we put some number, we will get error. If we put 0, we get error. If we put negative value, it cannot be negative 0, we will get some answer. And what do you think, why is that? I will explain you where is the problem. Problem is, like I already say, in this line. So we cannot, first of all, make this to be written in this way. And second problem is that this number of meters which belong to previous function we cannot check. Okay? So we need to change this to be user input. Oops. User input. And here we also change this to be user input. So when we put these proper values like user input, and when we make this checking, we will get error. And this type of error is that it's not supported between instances of strings and integer. And of course, everyone will say now, yeah, we need just to switch this to be converted result. And when we change this converted result instead of user input, we will get actually, unfortunately, same error. So we can make calculation if it's text, we can make calculation if it's negative value, we can make calculation with anything else, because this checking break in this line. So what we can do? We can now make this code to be a little bit complicated. We can define something like this. Instead of this line, converted result, and here is nested function, we can call this variable user input value, for example. It will be a little bit confusing, just follow me. User input value. And here we will define that it is integer of user input. And like this we eliminate this error from previous videos that entered value from this user input function is not string. So we defined it to be integer here. And now we will use this user input value variable like something what we will check with this if statement. But now we need to make this unit conversion new variable to be from this function. Let me show it, meter to centimeter. So this must be something from this function, meter to centimeter, entered as user input value. Okay, and then we print here unit conversion. Let me copy unit conversion. Okay, and then here if we have not converted result, we again have user input value. I will explain you in a second what it's this and why we should do like this. And then when we save here and run this application, for text everything works, for 0 everything works, and now for any kind of integer everything works. And let me explain you why. So in our first code, original code, in this line we nested this line and this line together. Do you remember this? But when we have nested this value, what we request from this first function here, which makes only conversion, we cannot put this if statement to check is it that number greater than 0, is it positive number. So we need to break apart that nested function. But remember, if you don't want to put all validation in one function, then everything what we did in previous video is absolutely fine. But the way how I write it here is the proper way how to write application code. So you have one function which makes only conversion from meters to centimeters. And this is the only thing what this function should do. And then we defined another function which makes all validations. And we use nested if-else statements. You see, this is first if-else statement, this is second nested if-else statement. And in this way, everything what we want to check, we just merge under one defined function. And if you want to change something, if you want to add something, if you want to do something else or provide some other kind of validation, we can do it clearly just in this function. And before we have parts of validations splitted into different functions. Like this, we have everything under only one function which is related for validation. So let me explain you what causes trouble to many people to give up here. Watch this very carefully. When we define that user input from this variable, global variable, is a digit, that's first checking. That means I want to check what user enter from my prompt is entered and its digit. Then we store that in user input value variable and we convert it to be integer. Okay? And after we convert this string, which is number anyway, but it's input, the way how we store it in variable, we need to convert it to be integer with this function here, int. And we store it in this variable. After that, we can make this if checking. So we say if user input value is greater than 0, then we make new variable called unit conversion, where we put this user input value, you see, as parameter of this function here. See, meter to centimeter, we just put it here like parameter here. And then we print result of this function. That's simple. And then else, if it's 0, we get this error. And if it's everything else, which is not integer, positive, negative, or 0, print this error message. So it might be confusing, but I will tell you like this. Try to repeat this by yourself. You have task from the beginning of this video to calculate how much time you need to invest per days, per weeks, per month to study and learn Python. And now when you see what I change here, I defined just two new variables, and these variables are here. So this variable and this variable, because if you watch 2-3 previous videos before, you will understand that this is what I merge. Now I break it apart just because that I can make this validation between. And that's it. And I will repeat again. If you don't want to put all validation under just one function, then previous code from previous video where we stop is totally fine. But one more time, this is a proper way how to make Python code. Calculation of main application is in one function, and that function have just one line and it's here. And all validation about entered value from user input prompt are in second function. So guys, if you have any question, if you face any problem, feel free to ask and I will do my best to explain. And I hope this is perfectly clear for anyone and everyone that you understand what we just did. And in our next video, we will discuss more about how to check errors in our code.